Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Skip Rutherford, Dean of the Clinton School, and welcome to this program tonight. I'm glad to see you here. Could I please ask everyone to turn your cell phones and other electronic devices off? I'm going to be moderating this program with our guest, but to introduce him, I'm going to introduce a Clinton School student, Lauren Remedios, who is from Bangalore, India, and she received her bachelor's degree from St. Andrew's College in Mumbai, India. She then earned a master's degree at Henderson State University in Arkadelphia. She has been very involved with Literacy Action of Central Arkansas, where we have a group working right now, and recently at their Salute to Volunteers, she was recognized for her work with adult tutoring, and she's done some great work in that area. At the Clinton School, she's working with the Arkansas Out of School Network, and that is developing experiences and analyzing experiences for Arkansas youth during non-school hours. And it is an important project that we also are very proud to be a part of. Please welcome Clinton School student Lauren Remedios.
Thank you, Dean Rutherford. So 2 days ago, I was reading Mr. Henry DeCio's blog, and he said that he loves autumn and the changing of the colors and the crunchy leaves outside, so I'm so glad that you're visiting our natural state at this perfect time. Mr. Henry DeCio has an impressive resume. He began his career in California Democratic politics. He served as a deputy assistant to President Barack Obama and was a 2008 chief operating officer at Obama for America. In 2001, Mr. DeCio founded Way Forward Strategies that focuses on promoting political leadership and impact communication. Well, if this wasn't impressive enough, Mr. DeCio is a crisis management aficionado, a political analyst, and a sought-after public speaker. His experiences on the campaign trail have been broadcasted on Radio BBC, National Public Radio, the Financial Times, and numerous other international publications. Currently, Mr. DeCio is working with the nonprofit Ashoka, leading the Framework Change Initiative aimed at preparing the next generation of innovators. Ashoka builds communities of social innovators working collectively to find solutions to transform society with the belief that everyone is a change maker. DeCio earned his BA in Political Science at UC Santa Barbara and a master's degree in Public Administration from Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University, where he also serves as the Director of Alumni Affairs. I would like to end with Mr. DeCio's initiative motto, which says, "Change your thoughts and you will change the world." So please join me in welcoming Dean Rutherford and Mr. Henry DeCio.
Well, welcome to Arkansas.
Thanks so much.
And Ashoka, tell me how you got connected with it. What brought you to that organization? What attracted you? And how you got there?
Yeah. And it's nice to see you all. Thanks for coming out tonight. It's a great opportunity for me. So I became acquainted with Ashoka back in 2000 when I was at the Kennedy School. And I was really at that point, I'd been in advocacy work, I guess, and around politics for most of my career at that point, about 15 years. And when I went to the Kennedy School, I thought I was going there because I wanted to get more involved in politics. But what I found while I was there was I was really reflecting on my leadership over the course of my career, and I was really discovering my inner leader. And at that time, I became attracted to Ashoka because I'd learned about this organization called Ashoka that was essentially developing and supporting innovators who were dedicated to social good. And they had these fellows, and it was just fascinating to read about these people with big ideas, these big leaders with big ideas, everyday people who were doing big things in their communities. And so I thought this would be a great place for me after Harvard, but I didn't rediscover Ashoka until I left the White House, which was last July. And it was several months later that I just met someone on the street, and he said, a friend of mine, and he said, I'm going to talk to these guys, Ashoka, and I said, you have to introduce me to these folks. But I will say that when I left the White House, I had this whole new idea of leadership. I thought that, the leadership I'd known for up until 2000 was, you have a leader, you point the way, the big idea, everybody follows, and I was sort of into that sort of thinking. And when I'd left the White House and after my experience in Obama, I realized that, today's leader, everybody who worked for me in Obama for America was a leader, and they all had to command their space. And I really came out of that experience thinking everybody needs to be a leader, and they need to have these qualities. And I thought that Ashoka was going to be outdated for me. And when I did rediscover them, what I found out was that they had really evolved into this organization that was now thinking about how do you scale the principles, these characteristics of these fellows that they'd been these 3,000 fellows that they'd been working with over the globe, or across the globe over 30 years. How do you take the qualities of these folks and help everybody have these qualities? And that was where I was hooked. And so that's how I got involved in Ashoka.
So it's 3,000 Ashoka fellows. How does one get to be an Ashoka fellow?
Well, I think usually they're nominated. There are other people who are very entrepreneurial who see the work of folks on the ground, and they're in communities all over the globe, and they're typically nominated. They go through a pretty rigorous process to prove that they've got societal interests at heart, that they have entrepreneurial spirit in their work, and that they are committed to the social good. They're typically helping strengthen the citizen sector around the world, often by collaborating with the private sector. And so to serve often underserved communities. So it's a pretty strenuous process that they go through. It's a pretty rigid process. By the way, they also go through, to get on their staff, you have to go through a pretty rigorous process as well. There's a lot of scrutiny.
Yeah, and so tell us about that, because we have a student, as you know, you visited
Absolutely.
with him, I think yesterday, Jordan Abel, who's a classmate of this many people here, who is doing his capstone or individual project with Ashoka in Washington. And I know he worked hard to get that spot. How do you get there?
Well, there's different paths, I guess. One is, to get on staff, I would imagine he came through an A-year program that they have, which is aimed at helping young people, connecting young people, rising professionals with this sector. And I think it's a one-year program in his case, probably. There's different ways to do this. I mean, ultimately what I think they're looking for in Ashoka are people, and I'm using my own sort of definition, but it's something I think is important in the characteristics of these leaders that we've been talking about. They're looking for people with an innovative mind, a service heart, an entrepreneurial spirit, and a collaborative outlook, ultimately. And that's part of what the work that I'm doing with Ashoka is, this initiative called Everyone a Changemaker. And that is I'm in this space of helping try to bring that to everyone across the globe.
You've talked about what you've called an unsiloed world. What do you mean by that?
So when I came out of Obama for America, that was one of the things that this idea of new leadership that I was thinking about. And that is, the world I graduated out of is not the world I'm in today. And I think I had a pretty good sense of what the world was going to look like when I graduated. In fact, I will just tell you that a lot of my classmates had this idea. The conversation would have been something like, I'm going to go out, I'm going to get a job, I'm going to retire at 50 with a good pension, and and after 30 years with the company or whatever. And, you know, we're all getting there, and nobody's had that 30-year career. We don't have pensions for the most part. Our 401ks, by the way, are back at 1992 levels, the most recent reports are. And, you know, visiting the library here today, and I'm always struck by this by President Clinton, I always remember him saying that when I became president, there were 130 websites. When I left, there were 27 million websites. Imagine if you're coming into that world that I came into, you could not have foreseen that kind of world when I graduated. And so this idea that you'd have certain skills, specific skills that would guide you through a 40-year career, just don't work anymore. And with that, with technology and some of these other changes, we don't live in the same world, even in terms of those boundaries that we used to understand. There's not boundaries around our schools anymore. If you're in a community with a failing school, you don't leave that to the principals and teachers anymore. If you're a small business looking at that school, you've got a stake in that school. And in everything we do now, we are interrelated and interdependent, and everything is coming at us in many different ways. And so you need to have different skills today to be able to command this world. And I like to say that for people to get into their biggest place, they need to have this skill. They need to really pay attention to this skill of an innovative mind, a service heart, an entrepreneurial spirit, and a collaborative outlook, because we need big people to do big things in this world, and we can't have small people trying to command that.
So talk about the importance of a team and how that plays into Ashoka.
Ashoka, I'm going to also deviate back into my Obama experience on this too, because Ashoka believes today, the founder, Bill Drayton, the CEO, he will talk about a team of teams. He basically says, the world is changing, that's a fact. We're in a very fluid environment now. We have to entrepreneur our way to success. We have to entrepreneur our way to change. We have to have those skills. And you need to be able to function in a fluid environment and in a team of teams kind of way, rather than just sort of a set team. And I'll give you another example why this relates to me and how I saw this work. In 2007, when we started Obama for America, you know, you come to a workplace that has, by the way, speaking of unsiloed, you come to an environment where there are no rules, no institutional history. You're building a village from scratch, and people come into this environment. It's chaotic, it's messy, it's not very comfortable, and we pretty much quickly form into silos. You have your, you know, whoever brought you in the door, sort of, you know, everyone who got in the door had somebody open that door, and so what you have is a sort of this feature where people sort of congregate together, maybe around departmental lines. As we got past Iowa, something really remarkable happened inside of Obama for America. Technology started to take over. People were entrepreneurial in their participation in our campaign, and what that did was, a lot of people like to talk about our technology. And how we, you know, maybe we had superiority of some sort in that way. The real thing that happened in that campaign was we made it so you didn't have to leave your kitchen and be engaged. You didn't have to go down to this precinct anymore, because you had all, with a phone, an internet connection, and a computer, you could be your own phone bank. And that really did change things, because what happened was when you take away that precinct office, in a way, not that people weren't using it, when it loses that same value, it's like not having to go to a bookstore anymore to buy your books. It's like not having to go to you know, a CD store to get your music. And what happens is, in the organization, we started to become flat. We were not hierarchical anymore. And in that sort of sense, we started becoming fluid as an organization, and people had to be able to command their leadership in a space that was not hierarchical or siloed. And we were a team of teams. By the end of the campaign, too, by the way, I'll give you one other example. By the end of the campaign, we had started in departments, but by the end of the campaign, we had people sitting in like this Noah's Ark configuration where you'd have, you know, one person from this department sitting next to another person in this department. You had like this representation in these different pods servicing different parts of the state. So you had a boss kind of at this table, your boss in your department, basically everybody else is your boss in the States and so forth, and you had to command your leadership in not a structured environment anymore. And we're finding workplaces everywhere are moving into this sort of, the successful workplaces are moving into this kind of structure, and you have to command your leadership in a way that is not the way that we used to know.
So what about these Ashoka programs like, you know, changemakers, empathy? How do you set those up, and what's the qualification to do that?
Well, let me talk about the program I work with. This initiative, I guess you could call it an initiative, but it's really our whole work in Ashoka. But I work on what is called what I call everyone a changemaker. I guess I'm the every young person is changemaker division, because what we're trying to do with that is we're trying to take these qualities of our entrepreneurs, of our social entrepreneurs, our fellows that we've seen a pattern in these people that is giving us clues to how everybody can have these characteristics of success and of entrepreneurship. And the qualities that seem to stand out, in my mind, in the fellows that I've met, they have an empathy chip. They have an empathy chip. They have this ability to be tuned into their surroundings, and they know what the needs are. They know also what the market is. They can work with other people. They can lead collaboratively. And so that's the first thing. And so a lot of what we do in Ashoka is we're trying to build support around the notion of every child mastering empathy. Not as something that would be nice, but as a requirement for today's world and commanding your leadership. The second thing we found in these fellows was that they had some kind of entrepreneurial experience in their teens that stuck with them for the rest of their lives. And sometimes and often that's a multicultural experience, but there is this notion that if you have a teen leadership experience, you master your leadership and you can lead collaboratively in your teens, you will keep that for the rest of your life. And so that is a lot of what I'm doing, is working with parents and teachers and community leaders, not just in the United States but around the globe, to get support for this idea that every young person should be a change maker, this new leader, and that they should master empathy and command their leadership collaboratively in their teens.
Most of the students here are right now working on a team project. Yeah. So what advice would you say or give to them about this experience, which they've been into, most of them or some of them, for about a month? And team dynamics are not always easy. Yeah. So what would be your advice in terms of making teams more effective? Because over lunch today, you and I talked about of the experiences the students have at the Clinton School. This team-based experience may be, in terms of career-wise, the most valuable, attractive feature to employers. So would you talk more about that?
I have to say I've fallen in love with your program and with this school in my brief experience. And it's long been my own thinking that you have to be able to practice and reflect to get good at this. And so this idea of practical experience, number one, I think is hugely important. Secondly, I do think that it is very hard to do these team projects. I talk to university professors in my work who say the hardest projects that the most difficult projects for students are the team projects. But you cannot survive in today's workforce if you can't relate to each other. And so how do you do that, though, right? That's one thing. And I think a couple things. One is, I think you have to be able to step into your biggest place when you go into these types of environments. We have a tendency in society to make each other small. We define ourselves very simply, and we put ourselves into boxes. We do it to ourselves as much as we do it to the person next to us. And in a team environment, you can sometimes start getting pegged as the this person or the that person, whatever your skill is. And I think the key is to be able to step into your bigness and to be able to bring everybody else up into their biggest place. And respect is huge in that. When we built Obama for America from the beginning, when you come into a political campaign, usually those are built from seeds of turmoil. Again, like I said, you come into a place that is blank, and you're all working together, and you're asking Sam the Red Sox fan to put your computer in because you don't know Sam's last name yet. And so you have this sort of dynamic where you're trying to get things done, and the most important thing that you can do in that environment is the way we calmed that environment was our candidate came out with 3 things that speak exactly to what you said. Respect everyone, build it from the bottom up, and I think everybody remembers no drama. And I think in a team environment, that was the best advice that I got when I was building my organization. And I think when you're working in a team environment, those are great words to remember. And when you build it from the bottom up, by the way, it just means that we're all equal here. We're all just trying to get our piece done in the best way that we can.
And how do you get, like how many applications do you get from people that want to work at Ashoka or people that want to be Ashoka fellows? I mean, is it, because clearly it is a very attractive organization. And from a lot of young people here, I mean, it's one of the organizations I get calls about all the time. When are you going to have somebody from Ashoka at the Clinton School? Well, now we got you. So how do we, what do you say about that?
It is, I mean, well, first of all, everything's competitive now, right? And so I don't know exactly the number of resumes and so forth that we get. What I think is important about how Ashoka works, look, I tried the resume thing, by the way, in 2001. It didn't work so well for me. It took me another 12 years to get to Ashoka. But what I would say is that I've had some conversations today with people, and I think it's absolutely right. You've just got to entrepreneur your way to where you want to be. And that requires a very different kind of thinking, right? That means that you do have to start to connect with people, and not just in a how can I get a job at Ashoka way. And this is, by the way, not just Ashoka. I think in anything, you've got to bring value now. Everything you do. If you're doing a TED Talk, if you're if you're involved in doing TED Talks in St. Louis, there's something valuable there to Ashoka and to Ashoka Fellows and to, some of the network that's there. So we were talking today earlier about that, right? You have something of value, and you've got to bring that to the table. And similarly, some of you, like Jordan, who's going and working at Ashoka now, he's doing a 1-year program. He's showing off his skills. I mean, he's got a huge opportunity right now, and as we talked about, he's got to be able to both stay in his biggest place and command his leadership in whatever he does. He's got to build a market for himself in that environment so he can stay longer if that's what he wants to do, or network to the next place he wants to go. And he's got to command his own CEO-ness even if he's not the CEO of the company, right? He's got to be able to show his competence. And so I think that there's no one path anymore, but I think the most failed path when I give advice, and I probably have somebody in Ashoka who's going to yell at me, the most failed path is trying to just sort of send lobbing a resume in and trying to make it work. I think you really do have to find how you can connect with people and bring value to what they're doing. And, it's sort of still the same old rule, which is people will work with who they like to work with. And that's not just about it partly goes to your personality. It definitely goes to your competence.
Would you talk, one more question, then we'll throw it over, but would you talk about what you mentioned about Jordan, and now he's got a year, and it's a great experience, and he has the opportunity to showcase his talents. What do you say to those people who get those opportunities, who are out there representing their teams and with organizations all over Arkansas and doing work all over the country and the world, and they don't perform? How bad is that?
Wow. Well, I used to say this too about even when we were in the heart of our race in 2008, we had people who were going from state to state to state, and your last performance in that last state you were in really made all the difference in what your job was in the next state, or if you got one. And so people were moving along. It really is important now. Again, I will just get back to there's three things that I take from the campaign trail, but also I think speak to these qualities of leadership. I always say that there's my three favorite principles of mine from my political days. One is, define thyself lest you be defined. You've got to go in and know who you are when you go into any situation. Secondly, you have to have, or you have to be working toward building a base. You have to know where your market is for what you want to do, for what your passion is, or you have to try to create that market. However you can entrepreneur your way to that. And the third thing is, you have to command your CEO-ness. And I will tell you that, and you have to have this relational chip. You really have to be able to have a sense of your surroundings. And I saw it in the early days of our organization when people came in, they had their own tactics for getting their way. In an unformed environment, and it was hard for them to recover their leadership. And you just, but people who came in strong, those impressions are lasting. So I think I found very early in my career, and I don't think this has changed for any of you, all my jobs that I got, and I had to entrepreneur my way to my first, I came out in the Reagan recession, so I know what y'all are going through. This was a tough time for us coming out of school. And my first jobs were jobs where I showed off my skills as a volunteer. I guess somebody said I was getting some kind of wage, but the reality was I was volunteering, showing off my skills, and then somebody said, you need to get this guy. And I think it's still the way, and by the way, it's the same today. It doesn't change over my career. I still have to have something of value. I still have to bring attitude, and I still have to command my my CEO-ness.
All right. Questions? Yes. Katie, we'll wait for the microphone here.
Hi, my name is Katie Milligan. I'm a second-year student. It's a pleasure to have you. I think you gave great advice. You talked a lot about teaching empathy to students and the challenges of technology, and especially technology teaching empathy seems like a major challenge. Could you touch more on that and how you're using technology to your advantage to instill those lessons?
Sure. And where are you from? You're from Little Rock? Uh-huh. Well, here's where things start to crumble. I am not particularly an expert in empathy. And so I'm going to explain this a little bit because I try to keep the empathy chip sharp, but I don't understand exactly how to help people have it. I try to practice it as a dad, so I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they're teaching me empathy every day. One of the things that I'm really trying, that I came out of my Obama experience, but as I reflect back on my career as a whole, was just this value of being able to command your leadership by understanding your surroundings. And I've had some exposure to President Clinton, for example. I think that this is a man who just sees things that we don't see because he's got that finely honed ability. And it really changes his leadership. I am, by the way, going to answer your question, but I do want to deviate for a second. I was with him in April, and we were doing I was telling Dean Rutherford, we were doing an event at the museum in Washington, D.C. for the flight that fell, Flight 93 that fell in Pennsylvania. And most people came because they wanted to show their support for the fallen victims. And he gave this really, he gave this amazing frame change analysis, which was those people were not victims. Those people were heroes. We don't know when, in that moment, when the moment was on that plane when they decided to bring the plane down, but we know they decided to bring that plane down because they knew what was going on around them, and they knew that that plane was headed for bad things. And so there was a decision, and he said, look, the people don't have the capacity, our capacity is to survive. When do you make that decision to take that plane down? And he said those people were not victims. Those people chose to enlist in the Homeland Security in that moment. And this gets to a point that I think you raised earlier, Dean, which is this is no longer, he said when I was president, he said this to me privately, when I was president, we had Homeland Security and we had, today, we don't have those same boundaries. It requires all of us to step up and do more and to cross what used to be boundaries. And that requires such an amazing understanding to be able to just frame it that way. And what he said also was, we need to build this learning center at the site because we need our young people to know what happened here, because they may, when they step into their leadership, they're going to need to have this reference. I'm not an expert on how to do empathy. There are people who are, and I always try to connect them. When we know there's a school that wants to do this, or we know that there's communities that want to do this for their young people, we do everything we can to try to connect people so they can exchange examples. But I will say that there was somebody, when I was talking about young people mastering it, or children mastering empathy, I remember getting a response from someone saying, well, we wouldn't do that where I'm from. And I said, well, why not? And they said, well, that just makes kids into doormats. And I thought it was a very, I thought it was a fun, they weren't saying this to be mean. They really were saying this, I want my kids need to be tough, they need, whatever, different things. But when I thought about it, and again, I go back to my experience in the political world and other experiences I've had, I really have always found that people who have that ability to relate actually are stronger leaders. And for me, the decision really ultimately came down, when I look at my own kids and I say, what do they need to survive in this world? And to be big in this world, and to contribute, and to make the most of the opportunities in this world, it's not even close. I want my kids to have, to master empathy. And I don't see it as a doormat maker, I see it as a door opener. Right? And so I think that there are examples of people like Bill Clinton that we can look to for that. But I think more and more we're finding that that is a strong characteristic of leadership.
Yeah, we'll go over here, then we'll come over there.
Hi, my name is Nate from Missouri, Southeast Missouri. You used the word entrepreneurial in a couple of different contexts while you were speaking, first in kind of a transformative context at OFA, and then several times as a verb. And I was wondering what exactly you mean by how do you entrepreneur?
Well, when I think back on the campaign again, this was a leadership experience for me when I was in the campaign. You're taking an organization from scratch and then turning it into ultimately the equivalent of a Fortune 1000 company at the end, right? And there's all the changes that go with it. A campaign like that changes form. Its life cycle is short, and it feels every single bump and change that a normal organization takes in this short amount of time. So everything is felt more sharply. Every crisis is felt more sharply. Every sort of power shift in the organization is felt more sharply. And it's really an intense environment to work in for 2 years. So for me, it was like a leadership laboratory. And I had a conversation at the end of the campaign with a gentleman that many of you may know. His name is David Gergen, who is at the Center for Public Leadership in Cambridge, and I knew him when I was a student. And he came to Chicago toward the end of the campaign, and I was really honored. He asked me to. I had known him, and he asked me to get together late one night, just chat. And he said, well, how about 9:30, this is toward the end of the campaign, so that meant I was going to get off early that night to go see him. And he said, what was your secret to success? Now, he's not projecting into November, but he's talking, how did you get to this point? And I said, and I described for him this personality that we hired that goes back to this idea of no drama, respect everyone, build it from the bottom up. When we had that moment, when Senator Obama said that, then Senator Obama said that, he wasn't just talking about our work environment. He was actually talking about he was also talking about the type of person we should have in the organization. I started hiring differently. I mean, I was no longer looking for a certain skill. I was looking for this personality. And so I said to David Gergen, I said, we hired this person, it was the people. It was, you can talk about new media, you can talk about a gifted candidate. Some people say our success was based on attracting young people. But in the end of the day, it really for me came down to the type of person. And he said, oh, you hired leaders. It was the first time I was really shifting my thinking about leadership into not just this one person at a time. And I said, I only hired leaders. Everybody who worked for me was a leader. And again, I started thinking about these qualities. these people had it across the board. Innovative minds, service hearts, entrepreneurial spirits, and collaborative outlook. And I would argue it's the ability to put all those things together and find your way to an end game. These were people that I worked with who were in very challenging situations that rarely said no. They usually found a way to get to yes, and it really took a lot of turns on the road to do that. And the only other thing I would say about this is that when I walked away from that campaign, I just believed that this was not just the people who worked for us. I thought the spirit of that experience for me was that we were tapping into that in communities everywhere. We weren't just tapping into that ultimately. And I'm not trying to be political, I'm just making a statement about this. There was something that was tapped into that is not Democrat or Republican here, and that I think we need in our society, because I think it really does bring out the biggest piece, the biggest part in all of us. We need big Democrats, we need big Republicans, we need big teachers. We can't have, by the way, small teachers, people who are made small by, by the pressures of society, trying to make little people big. We need big teachers. We need our biggest people running companies. And I always thought that I couldn't have small people. When Hillary left the race, I didn't know how we were going to take this thing from this mom and pop shop into Walmart overnight. This is June. We had to get this big overnight. And the only reason we did it was because we had people who could entrepreneur their way to that and had a sense that they had to have some responsibility, because you have no way to hold people accountable for their actions in those last days. I don't have the ability to hold out the carrot as a reward. We're not going to give them a job at the end of the campaign, particularly if we lose. We don't have the ability to give raises. We're not giving them stock options. We don't have the ability to hold the line on good behavior, except that people have to just do it. And if I start having people going out and opening offices without getting the approval or signing contracts without, we had thousands of people, and it could have happened. And it didn't, because we had that sense, that entrepreneurial spirit, and that understanding that we all were accountable to each other at the end of the day. And I think it's what makes any organization succeed and any community succeed.
Thank you. I feel like you already answered the question that I was going to ask. It was,
say it again.
But I'll tweak it again, and you could just affirm it. I feel like there's much transparency in Obama's public policies, and you could just see his leadership skills. But what about some of his latent characteristics that his team only gets to see and the public doesn't? I mean, what sort of leadership skills? Is he sort of like, does he use stridency? Is he a lenient leader? What sort of leadership does he possess? That may be a model for other people. So
yeah, I mean, I want to be careful about going too far into political world here, because I'm really here ultimately to talk about Ashoka and leadership. But I will just say this: I think the qualities I've seen in the best leaders and are people who again, I think you have to have a sense of where you're headed. I think it was easier when I was first coming out to point the way and sort of linearly get there, and maybe even kind of get there on your own. I think today you can know the way, but I think there's a lot of stuff going on along the way, and you have to be able to respond in those moments quickly, decisively, but also, I think, with a calm demeanor. And the leaders that I have seen, particularly in politics, but not just in politics, are people who have a very long-headed view of situations. They don't let the heat rise too fast. They don't allow finger pointing when stuff begins to get bad. They know that they might take some hits in the short term, but they look a little further down the line and know that these things are going to work themselves out as they go. And I think that's when I was first starting out, I think that you could be a leader who could look at a situation, sort of retreat, huddle with your advisors, think about what to do, come out with a response. And in this world, in politics, certainly when you're in the 24-second news cycle, it's very different than even in the 24-hour news cycle of Bill Clinton. But it's in everything we do now, in our communities, in our work, running organizations, you have to be able to respond with a longer view. And I find that is one of the things that I'm seeing helps leadership. And again, I'm not just talking about the person at the head of the organization. I'm also talking about the person at the bottom of the organization. In the world I come from in politics, you know, it's not what you do in crisis. It's now actually trying to decide if you are in a crisis. And more, that's the judgment that you have to start to make. Are we moving into crisis mode, or are people pushing us into crisis mode? It's very different lens.
Mark?
Hi, my name is Mark Peters. I'm a recent alum of the school. You were talking about...
By the way, where are you from?
Maryland. You were talking about like growing into your biggest self in organization. I think on a campaign, like you have a 25-year-old who has 13 field staff reporting to them, and you have people then coming out of that space and going to like, you know, maybe a nonprofit, maybe a company that's more entrenched, where you have very task-oriented goals. And I was wondering like, what advice you had for like pushing beyond that when you're not going to have the same freedom that you might have on a political race.
I'm gonna back up a little bit. I love that question, and I want to maybe give a little context for why I think this. There was a point in, again, there were 3 phases of the campaign. There was the early phase, which was the startup phase. Very chaotic. You're trying to get control of this crazy environment. Went from about March to September of 2007. Then September, you kind of have the organization that you're going to drive, the car you're going to drive into the primaries. Maybe even with some broken wheels or whatever, right? But you've got what you have, and you go to June with that, and very systematic, right? But you're having more pressures from the outside. Early pressures are inside. The pressures of that middle time are coming from outside. Because you're in full engagement, right? Your candidates are engagement at this point. You've got the media now totally tuned in. And then you go into this final phase, which is I call the scaling phase, which is now all of a sudden you've just got to get big, and pros are coming in from Washington, and all this kind of stuff is going on. And there was a point where I came out of one of our meetings at this, so this is after Hillary had gotten out of the race, and we're looking at a new, suddenly now looking at this new person, John McCain. And I was we had these morning meetings, and suddenly the old timers were not we were kind of outnumbered by the new people at the senior staff meeting. And I'd walk across this floor back to my work area, and we're sprouting up with people I don't even know, faster than, you can even imagine. And in this moment, what I was trying to decide, what do I do with my leadership now? Because my team knows what they're doing. The deputies who are working for me are fully commanding their leadership right now. They don't need me sort of meddling in their work. And so this was the first time I sort of got off balance with my own leadership in the campaign. And one of the things that I started to do was I started to realize I had to lift my leadership. In those early days, I had to be like the quarterback on the field, helping people get into place and understanding how to command their own leadership in this sort of weird environment. In the middle days, I was like the coach on the sidelines. People are starting to command their leadership, and I'm right there with them. In these final days, what happened was I had to be comfortable going above the fray and actually looking out a little bit more broadly. And what I saw when I looked out was when I say my staff, I had a staff now that was bigger, working right under me, that was bigger than what we had in all of Iowa in the primaries. It was crazy. And I was starting to realize that some of those people I'd been counting on for a long time were starting to get small. These big dogs were coming in, there's a lot happening. We didn't even have time to celebrate a victory, a hard-fought victory, before all of a sudden we have people coming in and you're worried about your job and what's going to happen. The thing that was really important about this moment was I lost a really good person. The campaign for the first time was an employees market. Other departments were opening slots and people could move, and I had this great trained group of people. I had a pretty good team, and I knew that everybody else in the organization wanted some of my folks. And I had one person leave, and he was, maybe not a key player, but he was somebody it made me think about this. And what I realized in that moment was he said something to me. He said that made his work sound small, like he was going to a better place in a way, right? And I was like, doggone it, you can't be, management's about as good as it gets. I mean, we are running this thing. How did this happen? And I started to realize that people were being defined into their small place. And I will take the example of our travel unit. If you called the travel team, right, we had about 4 people, they were hard workers, and you said, hey, listen, somebody wants to go to David Pluff wants to go to California. You are dealing with a travel booker. Okay, we'll get him a ticket, here he goes. I needed them to step into their leadership in that moment and say, listen, if David stops in Denver, he'll get a little time off the plane to do a little bit of work, and he'll save us $400. And we want to be stewards of our money, right? So they needed to step into their leadership. And what those people did, that team did during the course of the campaign, they gave me a report every week about their interventions, how much money they saved with their interventions. They saved enough money for us to run a small state on. But they didn't even realize it. And so what I was actually having to do was have people recalibrate. They were being made as small as that interaction, that phone call. You're the travel booker, help me. And they started becoming managers in a way. I needed them to be leaders. And so what I started to realize is that if all of my team started to understand the big, in this case, you're running the 3rd biggest line in our budget. We can't get wobbly if you guys just start opening the doors, right, to travel. And what I came to understand in that moment is everybody in life, in every work site, in every community, is defined into a small place. And it is really, I can't go around and help people get big. We really have to ourselves step into our own bigness, understand, and in what you're talking about, you have to understand that you are going into this place and you're going to perform these roles, and you have to see the biggest part of who you are and how you're contributing. Otherwise, you are defined by your transactions, your interactions, your inactions probably, right? And you've got to be conscious about how you are defined, how you are being defined based on your actions. And then you have to know where you're going. So I always say, that's why I always say you've got to bring your biggest self into the game. And once I was done with my staff, it took me 3 weeks to have individual conversations with every part of my staff. That's how many people we had. They were big. And I could not have small people trying to do big things in those last weeks. And so they were in their biggest space, ready to command a pretty big challenge of building this thing up into what it became at the end.
Dean DePeppa, you had a question.
Thank you for being here. I want to ask a question about social entrepreneurship. And what would you say to people who claim that social entrepreneurship is an oxymoron? That the skills and values of entrepreneurship are incompatible with the focus on the social good?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Well, some people would claim that social entrepreneurship is an oxymoron, that entrepreneurship is mostly self-serving, you develop individual skills, you're pursuing your own interests, and that combining it with some social purpose doesn't connect because they're incompatible in nature.
Well, look, it really gets back to, I think, what I was saying earlier. I do think that this idea of the change maker is born a little bit more from the social entrepreneurial crib, a little bit, if you will. But I also don't think a change maker has to be a social entrepreneur. But I do think that on some level, I don't know, I think entrepreneurship, it's my own opinion, I may be wrong about this, I think the most successful entrepreneurs are the ones who understand how to move teams of teams. And especially in the environment that we're moving into, it just seems like the world today requires all these other skills, and that entrepreneurship generally requires that people can relate to each other, understand a market together, and find the finish line together. So I guess that's my own thought. Maybe I haven't given enough thought to that, but I ultimately think. And it kind of goes to your question earlier, if we don't have that entrepreneurial spirit and that outlook, I think it just gets harder to succeed. But I also think in today's world, you just can't succeed without a team spirit.
John?
Thank you, Henry, for all the insight. My question pertains to that space in between creating the entrepreneurial spirit and that phase where you're trying to grow, like you did with OFA. I'm really focused on the flashpoint and what you may have experienced through your own creation of an organization or through witnessing it through Ashoka. What needs to happen during that phase if you have the spirit and you have an idea and you're looking to start something?
That's an excellent question. I'll give an Obama example, an Obama experience example, and an Ashoka example. Because I always remember this moment of like, how do we do this, right? How do we make this thing big? We've gone now for a year or something, year and a half, and we've gotten to the point that we're at. Now how do you just suddenly get big, right? All of a sudden. And what I really settled on was you can't scale the tactics. You have to scale the principles. And you have to make sure everybody understands what those principles are. And that was, I think, the key to our success. There were certain principles of managing our organization that we made sure were widely understood. And then you just have to hope that you've got good people around you who will respect that. In the Ashoka context, we have a program called Youth Venture. And Youth Venture is modeled on the idea that teens have a mentor. First of all, it's modeled on the idea that every young person should be a change maker. So it's not just any teen leadership program. It's the idea that you, at the end of this, you're ready for whatever's coming next in your life. And when we talk about it, it's very, very staff intensive and very, it requires a lot. You need a mentor if you're a young person. You need to recruit a team to help you with your project. And you have to build a business plan, and then you get to an end where you're evaluated based on how well you did and how well you relate and the good that you create. And that's our Youth Venture program. That is a lot of work to run from city to city and town to town and high school to high school and so forth. So I always look at that and say, well, what do we need to do? How do you scale that? How do you scale that into every city in the world? Because that's what I want, or every community in the world. Ultimately, I don't think you can, right? But what are the principles that you want to scale? And I'm wrestling with this now. I don't necessarily have the answers to this. I'm still learning about our youth venture and trying to figure this out. But I also go back to, like, I look at one example that I look at for that is some of you might be familiar with Weight Watchers, right? Weight Watchers is this program where people gather at a place and they support each other. So there's a support sort of mechanism. There's a formula that they have for success, which is a point system that, you know, if you eat so many points, then if you eat too many points, you get wobbly. And then you have this, well, I don't mean it that way, but, no, I mean, but you're not, so I'll keep going. If you eat too many points, and then there's this component that you maintain, right? Now, how do you get that? You can't do this in every city in the country, for example. You can't, it's hard. It's done in many places. Ultimately, what you scale are the principles. And they've done that in their online offering, right? They scale the principles of some kind of community, some kind of way in that you do, and the ability to manage yourself on this point system. And so it's not really tactical. I mean, there are some tactics involved, but they have principles. And so I look at that for you. I look at organizations and say, how did we do it in Obama for America? What was the secret to our success? We had principles that we scaled. How do you do it in something like Youth Venture? Not even our program, but if you're a youth and you're trying to do this, you scale principles. So in our case, we scaled, build it from the bottom up, respect everyone, no drama. We scaled that. That was a dominant theme all the way throughout our organization, through all of the changes that we went through. But also, we scaled some of the business principles that we had as well, without actually getting bogged down in how do you do this tactic more specifically.
Dr. Singhal.
Thank you, Mr. DCO. My name is Arvind Singhal. I was born in the land of Ashoka. I grew up on a street that was called Ashoka Road, and my first nursery school was Ashoka Nursery. So I feel a certain connection.
You go a long way back there. Is that how it became Singhalish?
Could be. Now, growing up in India, whenever we heard about King Ashoka and tales about him, one learned about courage, one learned about compassion, and one learned about the importance of the two going together. The transformative moment in his life was seeing the failure or the futility of war, and then he becomes the. So I want to ask you a question in the context of leadership, but looking at the principles of courage and compassion for oneself as well. So how, in your experience, do you see the value of the courage to fail, the courage to be vulnerable? And since you've used the term entrepreneurship and venture, I just wonder how that plays into the formative aspects of one's character.
Yeah, that's excellent. By the way, Bill Drayton, the founder of Ashoka, our organization, is spending a lot of time with me, helping me learn about Ashoka, King Ashoka. I would even like to say, let me just even take it a step further back, and even, I think there's an aspect of failure and success that you often hear people who are successful talk about. They talk about their failures as much as the learning experiences from those. I personally, without going into too much detail, have learned a lot from my failures on the campaign trail. You don't win 100% of the time. And you also understand based on, you learn in that laboratory, you learn the differences that separate the successful from the aspiring. But, and the best ones, I think, are the ones who do. I think James Carville won one race before he won his presidential race, if I remember right, and said he had a string of losers before that. So in that context, but I also would just say one of the things I've found in talking to our fellows in Ashoka, because I've really learned a lot from them, is how so many of them have overcome hardship in their childhood years, who lost a father when they were 7, who had family went bankrupt, and how they overcame that. And I really think about, I have a strong fear of failure, I will say that. And I'm always thinking that, boy, I really want to get it right for my kids, right? But you do, at the end of the day, when I look back on my career, I've had successes and even had my leadership fail. I succeeded ultimately. Early in my career, I had some really heavy, and without going into detail, I had some really heavy lifting to do very early in my career. I was playing a little bit, punching a little bit out of my, above my weight. And I succeeded. I was good at getting things done. But on the way, I kind of hobbled into the finish line with my leadership. And so the first time I was really asked about this, I thought about it, was when I tried to get into the Kennedy School with my application, and they said, talk about your your biggest failure. And I do believe that somebody, I heard it said, I can't remember, but whoever said, get those failures in early in life, I think that is absolutely, and that's why you should take chances now. When you're coming out and you're just starting to get yourself, you're trying to also find your passion, and you will find out in failure if you were really passionate about what you were doing. And I will also say that you will find out pretty quickly how to get to what you're passionate about, because it's a lot more exciting to fail when you're doing something you're passionate about than it is to fail at something you just don't have the heart for. And so if you can learn that early, I think that's best. And I love the way you said that, the courage to fail, because from the ashes, I do think you come out stronger, absolutely. And I think that entrepreneurial spirit relies on being able to not make that same mistake twice, or when you see somebody do it, to also to learn quickly from that person's mistake as well.
I have a question. This will be our last one. One more. This is it.
Hi, I'm Alia, and I'm from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. So you spoke a little bit about the characteristics of a person that would be good for like an organization like Ashoka. You talked about social skill, like social work, and you talked about collaborative sector and innovative spirit, and about empathy. And you spoke about entrepreneurial skill, and I just wanted to ask about whether there needs to be that component of like an economic entrepreneur or a creative entrepreneur, and how perhaps not having that technical background, what that does and what that means.
Yep. I think you'll get different advice from different people on this, right? My own guidance to people, to young rising stars is really get in touch with what you're passionate about. I do believe that we find that moment in our teens. There's something, it may not be the job, or there's something that grabs us that we gravitate to. And I always like to tell people, I ask this, I know it's a little overused, but I always say, so what's your superpower, right? But more importantly, when did you discover it? Because there's something in that moment that you have to go back and understand, because that's probably when you were at your entrepreneurial peak. And then we actually get probably duller over time. And so you will find that intersection of your passion and your ability to find the market for it, because you really want to succeed in that. And then we sort of move on to where society tells us we have to go, oftentimes. And I think it's really, truly the entrepreneurs that have the confidence to stay in that moment. So skills, I don't know. My passion, I learned about my passion very early. I did have a sense that I wanted to sort of right the wrongs in my neighborhood and in my world. I had an idea that politics was the way to do it, so I think I found a passion in politics early. And I was committed very early. I understood early that what I liked doing was helping people step into their bigness. And I found a way to combine, in a weird way, this leadership in politics and entrepreneurship in this space that I don't think anybody else would sort of do. I kind of think that's kind of why I'm unique. I also say to people, what is it that you do? Because if you play the guitar, there's guitar players are a dime a dozen. What makes you, Slash or Eddie Van Halen or George? What is it that makes you different in the space that you're in? So I think of leadership. I start from this saying I understand leadership and entrepreneurship from the political campaign, my background, my passion. That's what makes me think about, even when I'm in Ashoka and doing the things that I'm doing and helping people step into their biggest place in this place, I'm still get my juices fired up over here. Why did that person say that in crisis? I don't care what party they're in. Why did they do this? How did they move this way or that way? And then I take that and move that into the space that I'm in. And so I think you have to understand what your passion is. You have to, and that's defining self. That goes back to the early principles. Define yourself. Who are you? Secondly, you've got to have or work toward building a base. And that may mean you need certain skills that you definitely need to hone. It just may mean that you need certain qualities, but you've got to find that market, and you've got to have credibility with that market, whatever that is. And then finally, you've got to command your CEO-ness. And I don't think people can be great or step into their biggest place if they're just not doing what they love. But it's also kind of tragic if you're doing what you love and there's no way to sort of pay the bills, and you do have to still, I don't want to go too far on this, right? I want to make sure you're balancing all of these things. Otherwise it can sometimes be tragic. But if you're doing those three things and you're balancing your leadership in that way, that's what I think is when you're at their highest zone of impact.
Let's give Henry a round of applause. And congratulations on the great work that Ashoka is doing around the world. And thank you for learning more about the Clinton School, because these students are also doing great work around the country and the world too. So in the spirit of Jordan Abel, I hope we're able to send more your way. Henry, thank you very much.